let's examine the affordability of Disney's Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser Hotel on this episode of Out Loud Geek. Welcome to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss science fiction, fantasy, cooking, the outdoors, and more. As we've touched on in two previous videos, the cost to stay and experience Disney's Galactic Starcruiser Hotel is subdivided into three tiers in terms of cost. Given that Disney treats the hotel as being similar to a cruise ship, even though it has been described as a stationary windowless concrete bunker by some, this means that any guests staying there have to stay for the duration of what Disney describes as a cruise, which equates to a 2-night stay regardless of the priced tier. At the least expensive tier, which would be for 2 adults, the cost to stay at Disney's Galactic Starcruiser Hotel is $4,800. For the middle tier, which is for 2 adults and 1 child, the cost goes up to $5,300. And finally, at the most expensive tier, which is for 2 adults with 2 children, the cost rises to $6,000. If we focus for a moment on $4,800, that could be equivalent to 2 or 3 months worth of rent, or 2 or 3 months worth of house payments for a typical household. It could also be equivalent to a down payment for a new car, or possibly a year's worth or more of car payments. Any way you cut it, $4,800 is a lot of money, as is $6,000. For someone who doesn't have $4,800 to $6,000 sitting around in their personal bank account, but very much wants to stay at the Galactic Starcruiser Hotel, how long would it take to save that kind of money? That would depend on how much money 2 people could put aside for savings on a monthly basis. If 2 people, for example, could put aside and save $100 a month, and then not touch that money for 4 years, they would save over $4,800. Given that interest rates that banks pay dividends have been rather low, at around 0.5% or less, any interest earned wouldn't amount to a lot over 4 years. So the money saved would have to come directly out of people's pockets. If 2 people are gunning for the most expensive tier at $6,000 to stay at the hotel with 2 children, it would then take 5 years to reach that amount in savings if $100 is put aside and saved each month and not touched during the intervening years. So if 2 people started to save that kind of money today, they would have enough money saved to stay at the hotel in 2026 or 2027, depending upon the tier that they're saving for. Naturally, 4 or 5 years is a long time, and there's no guarantee that the hotel's rates are going to remain the same during the intervening years. If the hotel rates go up during the intervening years, then they'll either have to save for a longer amount of time or increase the amount of money that they're putting aside each month to remain on the 4 or 5 year schedule. But if during the intervening years the hotel isn't performing to Disney's expectations and Disney execs decide to close the hotel before the 2 people could save enough money to stay there, then they'd have to find another use for their saved money. To reduce the possibility of seeing the hotel rates go up or the hotel being potentially closed before being able to stay there, the 2 people would probably want to put a lot more money aside than just $100 a month. If they could instead put aside and save $200 a month, they could reduce the time needed to save $4,800 to $6,000 from 4 to 5 years down to 2 to 2.5 years. And it would enable them to stay at the hotel in 2024 or 2025 if they started to save today. But what if the two people could only save up to $50 a month? At that rate, it would take around 8 to 10 years to save enough money to stay at the hotel. But the compounding interest dividends might, for the longer duration, help to slightly reduce the amount of out-of-pocket money that would have to be saved. But they'd be waiting until 2030 or 2031 before they could actually stay at the hotel, which would greatly increase the possibility of higher hotel rates by the time they can afford to go, or the possibility of the hotel having been closed by Disney execs. Now, if two people don't want to wait several years to save up enough money to be able to stay at the Galactic Starcruiser hotel, and they could charge the full amount on a credit card, that would be one sure way of staying there at current rates with no possibility of the hotel being shut down beforehand. But if they can't pay off the credit card balance immediately, how much interest would it then cost them in addition to the already expensive hotel rates? If someone charged $4,800 on a credit card at an interest rate of 20%, and they could only afford to pay off the balance in monthly payments of $100, it would take them 8 years and 2 months to pay off the balance. And the total interest paid at 20% would be $4,937, which would be more than the original balance. So in that scenario, the grand total for two people staying 2 nights at the Galactic Starcruiser Hotel would end up costing them a grand total of $9,737. Naturally, if the person could make higher monthly credit card payments, then the total interest paid would be lower, as would the total amount of time needed to pay off the balance. But in the end, anyone who uses a credit card to cover the cost of staying at the Galactic Starcruiser Hotel and has to pay off the balance over time is going to be spending a lot more than the original $4,800 to $6,000 hotel rate, thanks to any interest on the balance that would also have to be paid. Now, if someone couldn't afford to pay $100 a month in credit card payments to pay off a balance, the minimum credit card payment might be around $80.50 at 20% on a balance of $4,800. At that payment level, it would take over 25 and a half years to pay off the balance, and the total interest paid would be around $19,949 for a grand total of $24,749 spent to stay 2 nights at the Galactic Starcruiser Hotel. So unless two people already have the money in their bank accounts to afford to stay at the hotel, or are willing to wait a few months or years to save up enough money to stay there, they will hopefully be financially able to pay off a large credit card balance quickly if they instead choose to charge their stay and pay it off over time. So what about people who'd really like to stay there but are living paycheck to paycheck? They wouldn't be able to afford to go. It's that simple. And according to the website Policy Advice, roughly 63% of Americans were living from paycheck to paycheck as of the year 2020. That's nearly 2/3 of the entire U.S. population, which means that around 2/3 of the U.S. cannot actually afford to stay at the Galactic Starcruiser Hotel, regardless of how much some of them may want to go. Living from paycheck to paycheck is about more than just having the monthly income needed for regular expenses. It also means not having sufficient savings for emergencies, which means that if something unforeseen happens, it can throw a family's finances into chaos. So what about people who earn at least $100,000 a year? About 30.7% of U.S. households earned over $100,000 in 2020. So the gap between Americans living from paycheck to paycheck and those earning $100,000 or more per year isn't that big. So it's probably safe to say that not more than 30% of the entire US population can probably afford to stay at the Galactic Starcruiser Hotel at the current rates. And if you take savings for retirement or savings for children's college educations into account, that number is only going to go down even more. Thus, I would personally guess that the total number of people in the US who could afford to stay at the Galactic Starcruiser Hotel is probably somewhere between 20 and 25%. But not all of that same 20 to 25% of the population is going to be interested in staying there. So we'll need to make an educated guess as to how many people in the US might actually be interested in staying at the Star Wars themed hotel. To do that, we'll begin by first assuming that no one who isn't a fan of the franchise will be interested in staying at the hotel. Next, while there are clearly millions of people in the US who love the franchise based on how well the movies have performed at the box office over the years, let's assume that maybe 10% of the entire US population considers themselves to be Star Wars fans. Naturally, different people in any fandom will love the franchise to varying degrees. So it's also going to be safe to assume that the vast majority of any fandom is going to be casual fans. And in the case of the Star Wars fandom, its casual fans probably won't be as interested in staying at the Galactic Starcruiser Hotel as compared with the hardcore fans. The one group of fans that will very likely want to stay at the Galactic Starcruiser Hotel are the hardcore fans. And assuming that all of the fans' love of the franchise might be similar to a normal distribution curve, the hardcore fans are probably going to start somewhere between the second and third deviation from the mean. So we'll guess here that the total number of hardcore fans is roughly 1% of the entire fandom. Thus, if the entire fandom is roughly 10% of the entire US population, then the hardcore fans would be roughly 1% of that, or 0.1% of the entire US population. Now, if the hardcore fans are evenly distributed throughout the various income levels, then only around 20 to 25% of them might be able to afford to stay at the Galactic Starcruiser Hotel. So 20 to 25% of the hardcore Star Wars fans might be roughly around 0.02 to 0.025% of the entire US population. Thus, given that there are roughly 329.5 million people in the US, we can guess that there are roughly 65,900 to 82,400 people in the US who probably want to stay at the Galactic Starcruiser Hotel who can also afford to do so. Conversely, the other 75 to 80% of the hardcore fans who want to stay at the hotel but can't afford to do so might roughly be around 247 to 264,000 people. This is the conundrum that Disney has created with the Galactic Starcruiser Hotel. Only a very small percentage of the entire US population is likely going to be interested in staying there, and of those who do want to stay there, only a small percentage of them will be able to afford to do so. And it's important to bear in mind that pretty much everything that Disney is only offering inside of the Galactic Starcruiser Hotel is essentially what Disney had originally promised was supposed to be part of Galaxy's Edge. Disney is milking the Star Wars fandom, and they know that's what they are doing. Hopefully those who do spend the money to stay at the hotel will only be those who can actually afford it and aren't simultaneously putting themselves into a significant amount of debt to have the experience. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button below. And if you'd like to see more of our videos in the future, please subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking on the red subscribe button. And please feel free to leave a comment. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.